Just goes into Fenwick. All right. Sir George Carteret. His share of Nova Caesarea would be East Jersey, aka North Jersey. Let's go to images because they did not do our guy justice in this photo. I'm almost sure. Statues. George Carteret statue to be removed. Yeah. There's a lot of places. I think, this isn't something that's going to shock everybody. But, he had a lot of places named after him. Statues of him. In North Jersey, they really dig this guy. I mean, technically, I guess East Jersey as a state of its own, which it was at one point, that's their founder, I guess, technically. So, I was just seeing if anything stood out here. I know there was statues of him. I knew that they might be removed. All right. Vice Admiral. Sir George Carteret. I'm just gonna read through the wiki. I like Wiki. Wiki's cool. They got some shit they need to deal with, like the rest of us. No judgment. But I know back in high school, my teachers would never let any of us submit a research paper with any we couldn't use Wikipedia as a source. Totally understand that though. Totally understand it. And I don't really rely on it for facts. It's just a good starting place, honestly. I mean, I'm pretty sure everyone feels that way. It's a good starting place. And a lot of times, at least for nerds like me, I actually think a lot of the Wikipedia articles, pages are pretty good reads. It's pretty simplistic, I think. But the cool part is when you go all the way down to the bottom, and further reading, because you do get sources. I like going to here's a lot of the sources here. So click on it. A lot of times it takes you to the original source. But anyway, let's just run through it quickly. Sir George Carteret, first baronet, 1610 to 1680, was a royalist statesman in Jersey, the Isle of Jersey. Right? Yeah, it's an island country in northwestern Europe and a self-governing British Crown dependency near the coast of northwest France. It is the largest of the Channel Islands and is 14 miles from Cottian Peninsula in Normandy. Royalist statesman in Jersey and England who served in the Clarendon Ministry as Treasurer of the Navy. He was also one of the original Lords proprietors of the former British colonies of Carolina and New Jersey. Carteret, New Jersey, and Carteret County, North Carolina, both in the United States, are named after him. He acquired the manor of Haynes, Bedfordshire, in about 1667. Okay, with the help of his uncle Philip de Carteret the second, third, Savner of Sark, George was able to gain a position in the Royal Navy. George dropped the DE from his surname when he entered the English Navy, concerned that it sounded too French. Interesting. Carteret joined a small group of naval captains in presenting a memorial of the Navy to King Charles I. According to Samuel Pepys, Carteret was responsible for presenting and recommending the first use of frigates in the Royal Navy from the blueprints of a Frenchman in St. Malo. And I guess this is a type of warship of that era. Samuel Pepys, if I'm saying his name right, I guess he was a politician. Let's see, he served as an Navy board member of Parliament, official in the Navy board and member of Parliament, but is most remembered today for the diary he kept for almost a decade. Though he had no maritime experience, Pepys rose to be the chief secretary to the Royal Navy. But anyway, that diary of his is actually pretty insightful, and it was kept over a 10-year period. He talks about Carteret and John Lord Berkeley in it. He had dinner a lot with Lord Berkeley. Comptroller of the Navy in November 1641 for his service to King Charles II. As a result of his early life at sea, he received little or no formal education. His ignorance was embarrassing and a source of much ridicule in later life. Andrew Marvell mocked his poor command of English, and Samuel Pepys remarked that his ignorance of even the most basic Latin phrases would cause a schoolboy to be whipped. Such ignorance is not to be borne in a privy councillor, wrote Pepys severely. Alright, so let's see, the English Civil War. What was was he doing? Let's see how long this is. All right. I know during the Civil War, I believe he was on the island and he kind of protected the island and ran it. And as far as I know, it always stayed in royalist possession. Sounds like they're getting replaced. Oh, he retired on the commencement of the Civil War. He retired from the Navy and withdrew with his family to Jersey, the island, where his uncle Sir Philip de Carteret was the bailiff and lieutenant governor. The island descended into conflict in 1643 with George and his uncle fighting on the side of the Royalists. The Royalists managed to hold on to the twin fortress of Mont Orgueil and Elizabeth Castle, and soon were able to rout the island's parliamentarian supporters. Carteret governed Jersey with great severity, imprisoning parliamentarian supporters and confiscating their property. Commissioned Vice Admiral and knighted in 1645, Carteret conducted a successful privateering operation against parliamentarian merchant ships. After the defeat of the Royalists on the mainland in 1645, Carteret afforded a asylum to the Prince of Wales, Charles Stuart, and other refugees of distinction within his government of Jersey, where he served as bailiff. Oh, okay. King Charles II. Dragoons. Carteret also had a small private army made up of royalists, veterans who had fled from England after the defeat of Charles I, and a collection of foreign mercenaries. George Carteret also had Charles II proclaimed king and saint. Okay, had him pronounced king on the island. 1649, having 23 other prominent people of Jersey, including his cousin Sir Philip Carteret and Elias Dumoresque, signed a proclamation after the execution of his father, King Charles I. Okay, in 1651, a parliamentarian expeditionary force was sent to capture the islands. Colonel James Heene was appointed the military commander of the invasion force, which numbered 3,000 men, comprising his own regiment, 6 companies, Sir Hardress Waller's foot, 2 troops of horse, and 200 men from Guernsey. The naval commander was General at Sea Robert Blake, whose fleet included 12 warships and a further 70 supply ships and transports. The fleet was sighted at dawn on the 20th of October to the northeast of Jersey and remained anchored in St. Owens Bay all day, waiting for favorable winds in order to start disembarking their troops on the shore. Upon hearing this news, Sir George Carteret mobilized the Jersey militia as well as his own professional soldiers. He dispatched the militia of Groville to defend the town of St. Helier. I'm reading here if you guys want to read off the screen. The royal, basically 1651, the royalists try, or the New Model Army tried to parliament. They tried to take the island, and it seems like they weren't successful. Carteret really held it down after several days of parliamentary and fleet trying to outmaneuver the royalists, leading many militiamen to desert the royalist cause. Admiral Blake decided to land his troops in the evening of the 22nd or 23rd of October. Carteret noticed that some of the ships were heading for the shoreline, and he gave the order for his army to prepare for battle. At first, the royalist cavalry charge was able to throw the parliamentarians back into the sea, with the militiamen firing into the ranks of the fleeing invaders. However, at the crucial moment, the cavalry commander, Colonel Beauville, was struck by a musket bullet and mortally wounded. With this loss, the cavalry fled from the battlefield, and with their retreat, the militiamen soon began to desert, despite the efforts of Carteret to rally them. Colonel Heen's troops then got themselves organized and disembarked without incident. It seems like a lot of people but Carteret was giving up. Colonel Heen soon began to overrun the island, with no resistance being offered by the royalists. Carteret's sole plan was to hold on to the two castles of Mont Orgueil and Elizabeth Castle, as well as the fort on the small inlet of St. Albans Bay, similar to the royalist strategy in 1643. I think that might be when John Fenwick went to Lindisfarne Castle. I could be wrong about that though. 43? I think that was 43. Just for giggles, let's go see real quick. I think it was over here. No, that was there. No, it was 1648. Womp, womp, womp. Okay. Anywho, this did not go according to plan, however, as the garrison of the St. Albans fort abandoned their post to the overcoming parliamentarians on the 23rd of October. And Mount Orgueil, which was not suited to artillery warfare, surrendered on the 25th of October. George Carteret, however, was determined to hold out at Elizabeth Castle in the hopes that a royalist relief force from France would arrive, or in the hopes of frustrating the parliamentarians so much that they abandoned the siege. See, this is when like history kind of gets exciting. It kind of would be dope to like witness this in some distant way. Elizabeth Castle was a far more imposing fortification than the likes of Mount Orgueil or St. Albans Fort. The castle was built on a rocky inlet which was about a mile off the coast, which meant that it was surrounded by the sea on all sides and made it difficult to be bombarded from the land. It also had an arsenal of 53 cannon defending the site, which had ample munitions and enough provisions for the garrison for about 8 months. Nevertheless, Colonel Heen erected a number of batteries as close to Elizabeth Castle as possible and began to bombard the castle. Also within Heen's arsenal were three large mortars which fired massive bombs, which were emplaced on a battery near the old harbor of St. Helier. But that was just probably crazy. That was probably just a whole crazy scene. Cannons back and forth, mortars. Oh, snap. On the night of the 9th and 10th November, a mortar shell fell into the roof of the old Abbey Church, which just so happened to be the building where the defenders had been keeping their munitions and gunpowder. The shell exploded on the lowest story of the privy and detonated the 12 barrels of gunpowder inside, which caused a massive explosion. The blast destroyed several adjacent buildings, which buried 40 members of the garrison nearby the blast under rubble. Of these, 16 men were killed, and another 10 were wounded. The blast also destroyed 2/3 of the food stores and beer and cider rations. More people running away. A panic ensued amongst the garrison in the aftermath of the explosion, with a number of the defenders deserting their posts and fleeing to St. Helier. These men were quickly captured and interrogated by the parliamentarians, who provided Colonel Heen with valuable information on the state of the castle's fortifications. The morale in the remaining garrison quickly declined, especially after an incident in which a Jersey man of the garrison was hanged for desertion. Despite these setbacks, George Carteret was determined to hold out for as long as possible, and he proceeded to keep the King's Standard flying over Elizabeth Castle for nearly another month. Damn. French wasn't going to help. In that time, he received word from Charles II, who had stated plainly that the French government were unwilling to help for fear of sparking a diplomatic incident with the English Commonwealth. Carteret was therefore very much on his own. Okay, so negotiation commenced between the two sides on the 5th of December, and by the 15th of December, it was agreed the defending garrison was to march out of the castle with full honors, with officers permitted to retain their swords, breastplates, and pistols. Sir George Carteret was allowed to take a single vessel, sail with all his possessions to France, and formally join the household of the exiled Charles II. On the eve of the surrender, Sir George invited Colonel Heen to dinner, and they met each other on the rocks at the foot of the fort. No, at the foot of Fort Charles, which was a part of Elizabeth Castle. And 15th December, he sailed out of there. He stayed in exile in France for 6 years until he was imprisoned in 1657. Thence he ventured to Venice. The warmth and kindness with which he received the refugees earned him a permanent place in the king's affections, and also the friendship of Edward Hyde. I can't remember now, but there's something, this name, Edward Hyde. I know who. Edward Hyde. Him and John Lord Berkeley were fighting over a girl. And Edward Hyde ended up with the chick. Restoration. Appointed Vice Chairman. His career for the next decade is documented in the diary of Samuel Pepys, who joined him as clerk of the Acts to the Navy Board in 1660. Damn, he sold his He exchanged his office as Vice Chamberlain with Lord Anglesey for that of Vice Treasurer of Ireland, an office which he sold in 1669 for £11,000. His influence seems to have been at its height in 1665 when he boasted to Pepys that the king did nothing without his knowledge. However, as the naval war dragged on, the Treasurer of the Navy was an obvious target of the opposition, and Pepys noted that by the spring of 1666, Carteret was being attacked on all sides. By the autumn of 1667, he confessed to Pepys that he was longing for the quiet of retirement. As treasurer, he was hardworking and free from any suspicion of corruption, although his colleagues at the Navy Board complained that they found his accounts difficult to follow. Although he sat on a number of committees, he was fairly an active member of the House. The fidelity with which Carteret, like John Berkeley, 1st Baron Berkeley of Stratton, had clung to the royal cause gave also great influence at court. He was close to Clarendon and to the Earl of Sandwich, whose daughter married Carteret's eldest son. In recognition of all the help given to him during his exile in Jersey in the 1640s, Charles II gave Carteret a large grant of land, part of the previously named New Netherland, which was promptly renamed New Jersey under his charge. With Berkeley, he became one of the proprietors of the province of Carolina. Carteret County, North Carolina, and the town of Carteret, New Jersey are named after him, and the city of Elizabeth. Everyone knows Elizabeth in Jersey. Elizabeth is named after his wife, as is Elizabethtown in North Carolina. 1665, Carteret was one of the drafters of the Concessions and Agreement, document that provided freedom of religion in the colony of New Jersey. It was issued as a proclamation for the structure of the government for the colony, written by the two proprietors, Lord Berkeley and Sir George Carteret. Okay, and then this is a lot of what I've been hinting to. Which Wiki makes it sound not so bad here, but Carteret was a signatory to the several declarations of the Company of the Royal Ventures of England trading into Africa, a document published in 1667 which led to the expansion of the Royal Africa Company. The Royal African Company was an English trading company established in 1660 by the House of Stuart and the City of London merchants to trade along the West African coast. It was overseen by the Duke of York, the brother of Charles II of England. we'll dive into that more in a second. In 1669, he faced expulsion from the House of Commons for misconduct as vice chamberlain, being accused of embezzlement. After a statement from the king expressing his satisfaction with Carteret and acquittal by the House of Lords, the inquiry against him lapsed. He was in fact generally regarded as an honest man. 1673, he was appointed one of the Lords of the Admiralty and continued in the public service until his death on 14th of January 1680. Shortly before Carteret's death, the king proposed to give him the title Baron Carteret, but Carteret died too soon, so the honor was granted to his grandson George. And George, who I think received most of his estate, the grandson, George, received most of his Carteret's estate. And the Carolina Charter, 7 of the 8 proprietors sold their share back to the crown. Grandson George Carteret, he was the only one who didn't. He kept the share of New Jersey, and he kept the share of Carolina, which was like the Granville district. I think it sits somewhere along the border of Virginia and North Carolina. I think that stayed in his possession well up to the Revolutionary War. I could be wrong about that, but I'm sure. He married his cousin Elizabeth de Carteret. Controversy. Okay, I'm gonna just read this whole clip right here. George Carteret is seen as a divisive figure in Jersey, which some seeing him very much as swashbuckling local hero, and others as prolific slave trader who made his fortune through piracy and slave trading. What is swashbuckling? No. Okay, behaving in a brave and exciting way. Okay. Maybe when he was defending the Isle of Jersey. With some seeing him very much as swashbuckling local hero, and others as a prolific slave trader who made his fortune through piracy and slave trading. Jersey writer Ollie Taylor, in his blog The Whitewashing of George Carteret, says that on one hand, Carteret has also been described as a hero, Jersey's greatest son, one of Jersey's greatest figures, and a role model for youngsters. But Taylor is also critical of a revisionist history, saying, by ignoring a fundamental part of Carteret's story, it ends up being exactly that, a rewriting of history. He explains that Carteret was one of the founding 6 committee members of the Company of Royal Adventures into Africa, set up in 1660 to trade in gold, ivory, and slaves, which apparently was also a family affair, with his son James collecting over 300 slaves from Africa for transportation to the West Indies during one of the company's early voyages in 1663. The company was succeeded 9 years later and was the template for the Royal African Company, of whom Carteret was a consultant and early minor investor. The Royal African Company went on to ship more African slaves to the Americas than any other institution in the history of the Atlantic slave trade. Between 1680 and 1688, Between 1680 and 1688, it transported approximately 5,000 slaves a year, totaling around 212,000 between the years 1662 and 1731. It's estimated that 44,000 men, women, and children died en route, with thousands of those who did survive arriving in the New World with the company's initials branded on their chests. In 2014, a constable of St. Peter sought and received over £36,000 in public funds to erect a statue of Carteret in Jersey to commemorate the 350th anniversary of the founding of New Jersey. In June 2020, following the murder of George Floyd and the widespread removal and destruction of monuments of those involved in slave trading around the world, the statue in St. Peter was defaced with white paint due to Carteret's involvement with the Royal African Company. One historian called the company the single most prolific trader of slaves. After calls from some residents of Jersey to move the statue to a museum were ignored, it was defaced again in August of 2020 with red paint and chains. Okay. Alright, let's go back to Google. Let's think what we're gonna say.